those murders, no one has ever been brought to justice. In our continuing investigation, News 3's Jessica James digs deeper into the murder of Hank Johnson and explains why the case not only impacted the family, but also cost one of the detectives his job.
According to the main detective, the Robertson County District Attorney's Office demanded he stop pursuing possible suspects in the investigation. A string of events, including a threatening phone call from the DA himself, would eventually cause the detective to quit his job here at the Hearne Police Department. It was his favorite song.
Mama told me when I was young,
The lyrics etched in a mother's broken heart.
sit beside me, my only son.
The title, carved in the headstone that marks the grave of Hank Johnson. Johnson was a simple man, a welder, a musician, a father, and a son.
I cannot stop until I know what happened.
In the summer of 2008, Johnson checked into room 125 at the Executive Inn. The 27-year-old was staying in the Hearne Motel while working at the Oak Grove plant in Robertson County. On the night of July 10th, he was found beaten half to death on the floor of his room, covered in his own blood. He never regained consciousness, died less than 2 weeks later. Former Hearne detective Steve Stokely headed up the case and developed several suspects. According to Stokely, 41-year-old Billy Blackburn was the first. Blackburn is the brother-in-law of Robertson County District Attorney John Paschall. Paschall questioned and cleared Blackburn. Blackburn handed over the name of another man, Ralph Martinez. Both Martinez and his girlfriend, Patricia Nelson, were covered in bruises the day they showed up at the Robertson County Courthouse. Meantime, Martinez and Nelson were each given a polygraph. Martinez failed. A day before Nelson took hers, Paschall phoned Maine Detective Steve Stokely. It was then, Stokely says, he learned Paschall had already conducted interviews with the suspects. The former Hearne detective recorded the conversation.
I just think I want to talk with Patricia. When we want to talk to Patricia, we want to polygraph Patricia based on what the statements he gave us. I don't want you talking to her and seeking her other information that will mess with the polygraph. Until after we polygraph her and she passes it or fails it, you talk to her from now to the damn when Jesus Christ comes back. But until then, I don't want you tampering with the witness. Tampering with the witness? You have fed these witnesses these potential information on the case. I don't want you just investigating us. Can I get any clearer than that? You guys talk to all of my potential witnesses way before I can even get to. I'll tell you what, you're about to piss me off. And when you piss me off, you're just to find out what happened. Is that a threat? No, that's a promise. You got that?
Shortly after that phone call took place, Stokely says his former chief showed him a piece of paper with 3 names on it. The details are laid out in this federal lawsuit. Stokely claims the chief suggested the men work for Paschall as possible hitmen, and that Stokely would be putting himself in jeopardy by pursuing the investigation. News 3 took the allegation straight to Paschall. He would only respond off camera. He jokingly said, quote, "If I did, I could sure put them to good use." Before the case was ripped from Stokely's hands, he tracked down 2 guitars stolen from Hank Johnson's motel room the night of the attack. Stokely traced them back to Trey Thompson. Thompson pled no contest to the theft charges, spent 6 days in jail for the crime. The police report does not indicate Thompson was ever developed as a suspect in the murder investigation.
When we identified these guitars, immediately he said, "Don't touch them, they're going to the lab." Well, indeed, they never went to the lab.
According to Paschall, the evidence wouldn't hold up in court because Stokely used his own money to buy the guitars off the street. Then, just before fall settled in, Stokely says all of his reports in the case file vanished. He was demoted and eventually left the department. That October, Paschall's office officially took over the investigation. Without any new leads, the case was shelved.
If I have to beg, if I have to plead, I will.
Ms. Johnson spent nearly 2 years hounding police, pressing Paschall's investigators to take samples of blood left under Hank's fingernails.
I called and I said, "Did you take the blood from under my son's fingernails?" And he said, No, ma'am.
Finally, in March of 2010, Miss Johnson stood by and watched as her son's body was exhumed. Medical examiners pried open the coffin, gathered possible DNA evidence that could slam the case shut. Almost 3 years since Hank Johnson's death, his killer remains silent. But one thing is certain.
This is about justice. And the justice of my son.
This mother won't.
We tried contacting the Texas Crime Lab to see if they were in fact able to extract DNA evidence from Hank's fingernails. They declined to comment. However, according to Ms. Johnson, they entered the DNA evidence into a national database back in May of 2010. It's been almost 1 year. Still, no results. Reporting in Hearne, Jessica James, News 3.
And Johnson's lawyer wrote several letters to the Brazos County District Attorney asking that he take over the investigation, and he finally agreed. We continue our coverage with a new case tonight at 10. And if you missed the first part of Murder at the Crossroads, log on to kbtx.com. Well,
Police were dispatched here to Navasota Street in Hearne. 2 men lay dead in the road, their bodies riddled with bullets. Just like the last case we told you about, Detective Steve Stokely with the Hearne Police Department headed up the investigation. But once again, the Robertson County District Attorney's Office would take over. Hearne, Texas, population 4,600. Nicknamed the Crossroads of Texas, 2 major rail lines cut through town. Just like the train's whistle slices through the silence of this sleepy city. Flowers and crosses lean against this tree on Navasota Street. It's where Shondell Lewis and Harry Monson were gunned down, their bodies discovered by a neighbor.
Death is an ugly sight.
Keith Boone's house faces that tree. He remembers every detail of that night, moments which still haunt him. At around 10:30 p.m., Boone heard people fighting across the street. Then gunfire filled the air.
Slipped on some clothes and come downstairs. Harry was lying by the truck and Chandel was lying close to the gas meter by the road. They just about basically gone in.
25-year-old Lewis was on his way to a party the night of October 25th. 57-year-old Monson just got home from work. Their killers had already taken off by the time Boone could call 911. To this day, he wonders why police never wanted to speak with him after that night.
I never was called in. No, I never did. Never did hear anything from him. Walked out there and told them, that I had walked up on them and where they could probably catch the guys, but I never heard anything after that.
By the time a rookie Hearne police officer arrived at the crime scene, another man was there, Shedrick Darnell. According to that officer's report, Darnell removed something from Shondell Lewis's body.
Some of the money was kind of hanging out of his pocket. He took the money, took it and gave it to Mr. Lewis's mother, Laura Lewis, later that evening.
Robertson County District Attorney John Paschal says Darnell was never considered a suspect. News 3 tried to get Darnell's side of the story, but he refused to speak to us. Phone records show Darnell called Lewis several times that night. The last call came within seconds of the shooting.
I feel in my heart that he met up with someone that he knew and trusted, but everyone else has pretty much gone out of town except for Cedric.
LaToshiA BOXELY, Lewis's cousin, who now lives out of state, begged police to take a closer look at Darnell, offering to hand over the phone records. But investigators, she says, wouldn't listen.
They refused. They refused, and the DA's office refused. The DA even told his employees not to talk to me.
She's a conspiracy freak, and she's irrelevant to this case.
Another woman came forward and pointed police toward another man, Torrance Proctor. The woman's sister was dating Proctor at the time, and according to her written statement, Proctor, who went by the nickname Trey, confessed to the killing. It reads, Trey repeated to me he was not going to be able to see my sister for a long time because he had just shot and killed 2 people. Trey also stated that the next-door neighbor just got home from work. I told him to come forward and tell the truth. Even though part of her statement matches up with Paschal's story,
Mr. Monson was employed at a local cafe and had been off work maybe less than 30 minutes, and he lived next door, or at the house where Mr. Lewis had pulled his truck into.
There's no record of police ever following up with Juarez, and the investigators involved refused to speak to News 3 about the story. Eventually, Proctor was cleared, and investigators began to narrow in on a man with a long rap sheet, Denard Anderson. Boxley says Anderson didn't have ties with her cousin, and to this day, she wonders why prosecutors never probed the other possible suspects in the case.
We feel that there was definitely something that went on. I feel that there are suspects that have possibly committed this crime and just are being looked over.
Pascal calls the murders a drug deal gone bad, but Boxley doesn't buy it.
If it was a big drug cover-up, why aren't the people who actually called and set up the deals, like, why aren't they arrested? Like, my thing is, what ties does he have with these people?